Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CEW podcast once again. As you know, as it always is at the start of the month, we just get these podcasts done. So I guess we'll just roll right into it. This is usually the small segment where I kind of talk about the month, i.e. April, kind of talk about what we're planning on doing for May, and then just any sort of like life updates and whatnot. So basically, April was a pretty solid month. If we're being completely honest, I think April was really, really good for the channel. I was able to get quite a few episodes out. I was able to get quite a few videos out. I am recording this on the 24th, because I usually record this round about the end of the month. So there is still a chance. In fact, I'm fairly certain. Let me just have a quick little look. There is a very high chance that we are still going to get one more video out this month before we go into May. So, things have been very good in April. We've been very happy with how that's gone. May might be a little bit slower because it is the final month of my diploma work, which means I've got to make sure I've got everything ready, got to make sure that everything's good. And also, it just so happens to be the time that Fight Forever is going to be in production. Because here's the scoop, here's the thing, I have Mayhem and Explosion Episode 8 recorded. I just need to find some time to sit down, do the commentary, and get those uploaded. And then also get Wednesday Night Warzone Episode 4 ready. Which doesn't take as long because I don't have to commentate for like an hour and a half. Maybe even longer sometimes, which I will say as a heads up, Mayhem Episode 8 is probably the longest episode of Mayhem of all time. So I hope you're ready for a bumper episode. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be different to how we usually do Mayhem. But I hope people enjoy the different style of it. So yeah, that's the updates. But I will say, for once, we are not going to be talking about 2K23. Instead, we're going to have two Core Talk sections. Because there was one I wanted to do, because I thought about it. And then there was one that I was having a chat with some peeps. And, someone recommended the one that we talked about and the one that's made it to the thumbnail. So, let's just get on with it. And start off with Core Talk. Workhorses. This is a very interesting topic, and I feel like it's something that, I don't know, I personally don't know if many people in Core really talk about workhorses. They're kind of put to one side, I feel like, in a lot of scenarios, because, as Core is, you need to be a good promo, a good character, and all of that stuff, and the movesets, as long as you have a decent moveset, you get quite far. But I just really want to talk about workhorses, because I feel like CEW has been built on the back of workhorses for quite some time. Your Stanley Owenses, your Braxton Myers, Trentex, in the women's division, you got your Mayu Shigatas, your Christine Rosarios, your Sky Simmons, those kinds of people. And, I am very partial to a workhorse. Someone that I can just book on a card and people will go, you know what, that's going to be a very, very good match. Why? Because it makes my job easier, as a booker and as someone that records matches. Because then it's like, well, you can still focus on a very good story. You can tell a very, very good story with workhorses. But the story a lot of the time is just who is going to walk out as the better wrestler. And I don't know, again, this is just me making an observation, but some of my favourite cores out there are the ones that feel like they are the workhorse. The ones that, and again, this isn't me like saying, oh, workhorses don't have characters. They do, they very much do. But to me, character alone isn't really what's going to get you, it will get you far. But then being able to just have a moveset or just have a character whose style in ring just works in the sense of it's gonna produce very, very good matches, and the story sometimes is just who is gonna be the better wrestler in the day, who is gonna walk out as the better wrestler. Sometimes that kind of basic entry-level story helps book people, helps get people booked, and it also sometimes just makes it easier for new people who are trying to just tune into the show. You know, because I feel like a lot of us, we do these very long, very intricate, very well thought out stories. But then if someone comes in halfway through, and they're watching say for example, a Blake Payne promo for the first time, and he's talking about things that happened like 2-3 years ago, whilst they'll now know that there's history, it's very, I would argue it's more difficult to kind of really digest that and go, okay, that's very interesting. Whereas if you can bring them in with just a very good work rate workhorse match, you know, like, I would argue the Gambit versus ATJ and Trent X, and Mayu Shigata and Jade Young versus the Violent Regime, the 2 tag matches I had on Mayhem 7, were just very good work rate matches with some very good cores with good movesets. But there was story there. You know, there was a reason why they were having the match. But if you're a new viewer, you're just looking at it in the sense of, well, these guys are just putting on good matches. And that's, again, that's what's going to bring people in to then listen to the story. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that workhorses are very much needed. And again, I do see a few workhorses here and there within the core space, but I feel like more needs to be done in core, and I feel like, you know, I don't like to toot my own horn, but it's very much like some of the only experience I can really kind of think about it, is, you know, the CEW Intercontinental Championship division for the longest time was the Workhorse prize. And the women's IC title is still very much that, you know. And kind of the story is that, you know, for that belt at the moment, is that Elizabeth Payne is kind of changing the perception of the women's IC title. For better or for worse, that is up to interpretation. But she has her vision on what a champion and what a championship should represent. And people like Shione, Eliza Stone, you know, Mayu Shigata, Madison Ace, those people, they all had their own kind of feelings about the belt, but a lot of them very much considered it workhorse and work rate. And it's just the exact same with the men's IC title. You know, when you look at the champions, ATJ, Nick Sullivan, Trent X, Stanley Owens, you know, Jinku, and now Darius Rascon, a lot of them are work rate guys. I mean, Stanley Owens is now the world champion, and he's delivering, you know, he had that absolute classic with Ben Jenkins. Work rate and workhorses, you know, are gonna help bring people in, because, again, you can get people invested in a story by getting them hooked on a match. And by getting them hooked in the match, they're going to be more inclined to listen to what the story is. So I guess what I'm trying to say, on top of the workhorse conversation, is also, you know, the match is just as important, if not more important, than the story being told as well. So now we're going to move on to quite an interesting topic here, and it's something that I feel like a lot of people have been kind of talking about. A lot of people have been kind of, you know, wondering what, like, some people's tips are for this. And, you know, again, this was recommended for something that I should talk about on the podcast. And it's finding motivation. You know, I would just say it now. And for those of you that make core shows, you'll know this, but for those of you that don't, they take a long time, especially the weekly show format. Because, you know, you've got to record the matches, then you got to, if you're one of those highlight reel people, you got to add in highlight reel, which means that the matches technically, recording wise, take about twice as long, if not longer, to record than they really should. Then you've got to do the promo segments, and then you've got to record all of that, then you've got to do voice lines, and if you have people outside, you've got to get those voice lines, and you've got to edit it all, then you've got to commentate it, and then you've got to find a time to drop it and premiere it. And, you know, it sometimes can get a bit daunting. It can really just, you know, chip away at your motivation to do it, because it is just such a massive hill to climb to get to the final product of a show. And I think the best way to find motivation, and this is what I do, and this isn't for everybody, but I will always encourage people to take breaks. Even if it's just for like a couple weeks or a month or whatnot, just try and do it frequently in a sense, so that then you're not constantly thinking about core. So that you're not constantly thinking about what show you're going to do next. You know, you're not constantly thinking about how can I improve this. You're just trying to think about, you know, something other than core. Because I guarantee you take your mind off of it for a bit, you'll start thinking of stuff, and then all of a sudden, something that isn't even related to core will give you an idea, it'll spark your motivation back up, and you'll be right back at it. How I tackle motivation, I can't really reveal that, because my motivation is to do with the plans for CEW. If I was to tell you, I feel like it would spoil things, but I guess I can just try and say this in the least spoilery way possible, and that is, the way I give myself motivation is the realization that there is an end goal. There is a final chapter for CEW. And, you know, as morbid and as crazy as it sounds, there is gonna come a time when, you know, that final chapter is done. When I start recording that and it's ready to go and I drop that. And that is it for CEW. Again, do I know when that is? No, not really. But it's kind of motivation for me. I always like to have an end goal in mind whenever I'm making a project. It's what got me through the academy. It's what's getting me through EPW, and it is what's keeping me going with CEW. But again, just the idea for finding motivation is just find it in the way that makes you feel happiest. I guess that's the thing for me, at least. You know, you've got to think in a sense of, well, you know, what works for me, for example, you know, taking breaks, having that end goal, might not work for you. You know, you might be someone that just needs to, like, you know, it needs to be more spontaneous. You know, you don't plan stuff out, and so when that inspiration hits and you want to do like a big show, you've got that motivation because you haven't done anything in a little bit, and you're ready to get back onto it. It could just be as simple as, you know, reading books, reading comic books, stuff like that, taking inspiration from things outside of wrestling. I find that some of my best moments and some of my best ideas come from when I'm not thinking about how can I present CEW in a wrestling manner? How can I present it as, you know, wrestling but with more to it? You know, like, the amount of times I've watched shows and have gone, wow, these characters could easily be a part of, you know, like, you know, some of the characters in CEW could easily be a part of, you know, this thing in a wrestling way. You know, inspiration comes to us all. Motivation comes from inspiration a lot of the time. You know, if you're not inspired to do something, are you going to be as motivated? And I think the best thing about finding motivation is just to have fun with it. Like, if you're not having fun, and, you know, if it's starting to get to the point where you boot up the game and it stresses you out to make a match, or it's stressing you out to book something, then you really do need to just, you know, reel it back a bit. Think about what's missing. What could be done to add more fun to the process? And it's something that I've thought about a lot, something I've had to do a lot, and, you know, through that I have found new motivation. Through that I have found ways of doing things that, you know, I didn't think were possible at first. Like, for example, you know, I'll just straight say it. The guys that you see on the back there, the broskies, this whole Geordie Diaz, Bradley British storyline was pitched to me by Daniel, the creator of Bradley British, and honestly, you know, when I read it, I was like, this is so different, and it was like, this is really good. I read it, I read the plans. I think we did kind of talk about it. We sort of tweaked some stuff here and there between us. And overall, you know, like, that motivated me. I was like, okay, now I really want to see this storyline through to the end. I really want to get to the point where, you know, we can say we did that, because this has been a really fun story. And like, you know, again, sometimes motivation can just be also having those good storylines, you know, having those stories that you really just want to keep going on, like, you know, just want to keep doing. You know, like the women's division storylines in CEW, you know, this like giant war of power that's going on in the main event scene. It's really fun. Like the world title stuff with Max and Stanley, and now Blake's being thrown into the mix. I really love doing that stuff, you know, bringing in Rascon rules is just something fun for me to, you know, kind of work on editing. And again, a lot of my motivation for me comes from the editing aspect. I feel like I'm talking a lot about this bit, but like, I think I always say this, it's always healthy to open up the dialogue and to just also say what I'm feeling when it comes to the stuff like finding motivation. You know, as I was saying, for me, a lot of the time, the motivation does come from, I just want to be able to learn how to edit this. Like, I want to be able to edit this in a way that, you know, is just really good. I want to be able to edit it in a way that I'm happy with it and that people will look at it and go, that's really well edited. You know, I have my own motivations. You have your own motivations. We all have our own inspirations that lead to motivation. We all have our ways of taking a break to then build up more motivation. It really, like I said, as much as, you know, we all love to, you know, say there has to be some sort of formula for motivation, or like we wish there was a formula, or like a way to build up motivation when we don't want, like, you know, when we just want to get stuff done and we're not motivated to do it. But it really isn't a one size fits all thing. It's a thing that you kind of have to talk about and you have to find yourself. I can give my tips, which I have, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, you know, what makes you want to do cool. Is it the storylines? Is it being able to edit stuff? Is it just making attires? Is it doing like the attire posts and, you know, making cool attires, cool entrances? Is it, you know, is it making logos in arenas? Is it making championships? Like, you know, we're all in core because we love this stuff. We love virtual wrestling. We love creating things. We're all creative individuals. You know, we're all fantastic. We all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. We all love doing stuff. And at the end of the day, you know, find motivation in what you like doing. And find that motivation in the way that works for you in a healthy way. You know, don't force the motivation. Just do it healthily. Do it healthily. Have fun with it. And, you know, I think you'll find that there will obviously always be times where you'll feel unmotivated, but it shouldn't happen as frequently if you just find a way to take a step back, not stress yourself out about it, and I think you'll find that. I think that's, like, as much as I can say before I end up rambling for, like, an hour and a half. So we are just gonna wrap this up. You know, thank you all for listening to the CEW podcast. I, as always, have been Byron. Mayhem, well, I say Mayhem. By the time this is out, I'm not sure if Wednesday Night Warzone 3 has dropped, and if the other thing regarding EPW has dropped yet. I would assume it has if I look at the schedule. Yeah, there's a very high chance that drops that this drops on the 6th of May. So, when I say it drops on the 6th of May, it might not. I'm not sure yet. But, yeah. Just keep an eye out if nothing EPW related has dropped before this. You'll know because it will be 2 back-to-back videos. And, you know, as always, you know, thank you all for listening. And I will see you all next time.